greatest outpouring of Charles Finney's life came here to Rochester, New York in September of 1830. In just 6 short months, this city would be completely transformed. It was a revival so significant that even Finney's harshest critic would call it the greatest work of God and the greatest revival of religion that the world has ever seen in so short a time. 100,000 salvations were recorded during the revival. Imagine that, my friend, 100,000. They came from all social classes, from politicians to businessmen, along with lawyers, teachers, physicians, and farmers. It was a city-wide reformation that shut down bars and caused the crime rate to drop dramatically. This event was the spark that ignited revivals that spread across the Northeast and New England during the Second Great Awakening. It became the blueprint for future evangelists and revivals throughout the 19th and 20th century. This is a significant stop on the Trail of Fire. Evangelist Charles Finney came to Rochester, New York in September of 1830 to fill the pulpit of Third Presbyterian Church. The congregation was without a pastor and in danger of disbanding. Originally, Finney and his team declined the invitation, believing that the infighting between 3 churches in town, the lack of a pastor, and the low moral condition of the city made it a very unpromising field of labor, especially considering the other invitations they had. However, the Holy Spirit challenged him in the night. While he wrestled in prayer, the Spirit said, "What are the reasons that deter you from going to Rochester?" Finney listed them quickly, but the Spirit of God responded, "Are these good reasons? Certainly, you are needed in Rochester more because of these." Finney surprised his team that following morning when he informed them that they would be taking the canal boat here to Rochester. This trip, he was joined with his family and his friends, Daniel Nash and Mr. Clary. Finney's strategy for winning a city was simple: prevailing prayer and powerful preaching. In the years prior to Rochester, Finney had perfected his style and become an effective soul winner. Upon arriving into town, Nash and Clary sought out a room for rent to begin a prayer meeting. They shut themselves in that room and began to intercede for the city. Nash and Clary would be rarely seen outside. They remained in that self-imposed cell where they were overcome with the spirit of prayer. They would fast for days, prostrating themselves on the ground, and through weeping and wailing, they made intercession for the city. Finney relied on the power of prayer. Prayer became the foundation of his ministry and the key to his success, a point that we must all learn from. Finney began meeting with influential people in town and setting meeting times. He would preach every night and 3 times on Sunday in the wood building that had been constructed by Third Church. During the day, he would meet with all those that were concerned about the state of their own souls. One of the first salvations in the city was won this way. It was a woman of great influence and social class. She came to visit him. She was anxious about her own soul, yet unwilling to give up her worldly ways. After meeting with Finney, she became greatly convicted and surrendered her life to Jesus. That day, she was gloriously saved. This high society woman began inviting all of her friends and family to come join the meetings and visit Finney. Her influence caused the meetings to grow quickly. Some people even came from as far away as 100 miles. Finney was always striving to perfect his method of soul winning. Here in Rochester, he began to use the anxious seat for the first time. He would preach against sin, holding nothing back. He would then call those that were broken and repentant over their worldliness to come forward. He'd clear the front rows of the church and ask people to sit in those seats as they began to pray with them. Ministers would labor amongst those who responded until they had won the victory of salvation for each one. Today, you and I call this an altar call. Well, right here, you find its roots. In fact, Finney's new measures, as they were called, had been greatly criticized to this point, but here in Rochester, the results spoke for themselves. The criticism and the persecution that he once faced faded, and that became the pattern for the revivals throughout the next century. One evening, a couple entered the revival meeting for the first time. It was a husband and wife, and they were greatly disturbed concerning their own salvation as Finney preached. However, neither was willing to move into the anxious seat for fear of the other. The following day, the wife called upon Finney. She informed the preacher that she would only come to salvation if her husband did. She was unwilling to leave him. She said if he was on his way to hell, then she would join him there as well. Finney could make no headway. That night, they planned to attend the meeting again. However, this time the husband said to the woman, "My dear, tonight I'm going forward." "What?" she said. "I told Mr. Finney today that I would not become a Christian or have anything to do with it, that if you did not become a Christian, I would not, and that if you went to hell, I would go with you." "Well," he said, "I don't mean to go to hell. I've made up my mind to go forward tonight and to give my heart to Christ." "Well," she said, "then I'm not going to go to that meeting. I don't want to see it. And if you have a mind, after all, to become a Christian, you may, but I won't." When the time came during the meeting for the altar call, the man went alone. He moved into the anxious seat. However, unknown to him, his wife had also slipped into the service. She came and took an opposite seat from her husband. Soon, both were kneeling together at the front of the church. However, that night, neither felt that they had received a breakthrough. The next morning, after a restless night, the husband came to see Finney. He and Finney met that morning, and then the wife also showed up at the home. They didn't know the other was there. Finney, sensing the Spirit of God at work, brought them together in the same room, and the moment they locked eyes, they broke down into tears. That morning, they found the peace of salvation together. Oh, to see evangelists once again with such a heart for people, willing to labor long hours with souls wrestling for salvation. It can be said that no single individual had more influence in the United States becoming to be considered a Christian nation than Charles Finney. Finney's revival sparked a great awakening and unified the country around the Bible and the power of prayer. His teachings on Christian perfectionism inspired the holiness movement of the 19th century and the Pentecostal and charismatic movements of the 20th century. Finney's evangelistic styles and methods, including prayer meetings before and during the event, nightly meetings for weeks at a time, altar calls, and pushing for decisions before listeners leave the auditorium, influenced everyone from D.L. Moody to Billy Graham. That fire all started right here in Rochester. My friends, study revival history. Look to the trail of fire and you will see the pattern has always been the same. Revival does not come by accident or happenstance. It may come suddenly, but never accidentally. It's time that we once again begin to prevail in prayer and get back to the preaching of the gospel. These are the two most effective tools that the church employs. They may have taken a back seat in recent decades, and our cities have paid a price as a result. A hurting city is the outcome of a weakened church, but however, they need not hurt any longer. Finney almost missed out on Rochester because he first focused on the problems facing the city. However, what he thought was many reasons not to come were all the reasons to come. I imagine that there's just as many reasons in your city as well.